In 1983, the town of Harrow, nestled in the dark shadow of Blackthorn Peak, was a place time had forgotten, a faded scar on the face of rural New England. Winding dirt roads snaked past weathered wooden houses, moss-covered roofs, and the eyes of the townsfolk always held a weary look, as if concealing a secret no one dared speak, a silent vow passed down generations. Blackthorn Peak, a jagged granite ridge shrouded in pines, cast a perpetual gloom over the town, as if sunlight could never truly touch its decaying heart. The locals rarely spoke of the mountain, and even fewer dared mention Blackthorn, Hollow, mysterious depression deep within the woods, where terrifying tales, whispered and cold, had been passed down through generations. Since the town's founding in the 19th century, Clara Whitaker, a 28-year-old librarian, had just moved to Harrow from Boston, bringing with her the hope of finding quiet refuge after a turbulent year, a year that had seen the shattering of every belief she held. With her neat brown hair, thin-rimmed glasses, and practical nature, she wasn't easily swayed by baseless superstitions. Clara came to work at the town library, an old building with creaking wooden walls and the scent of musty paper, the smell of forgotten memories lingering in the air. The townsfolk regarded her with reserve, as if strangers were a rare and unwelcome disruption to their insular existence. Conversations often ended with vague warnings about places not to go in the Blackthorn woods, whispers of curious souls vanishing. But Clara merely smiled, dismissing them as products of isolated rural imagination. Where fear easily took root, everything changed one dreary, rainy afternoon, as Clara sorted through the library's dusty archives and found a leather-bound journal, worn and brittle, imbued with the scent of age and timeless despair. The book was penned by Pastor Ezekiel Hawthorne in 1871. Meticulously detailing Blackthorn Hollow, Hawthorne described it as a rift in the world where shadows held consciousness, a void that twisted the soul, and spoke of an unseen entity dwelling within, something that saw into hearts, called the living by name, and drew them into eternal oblivion. He wrote of townsfolk vanishing without a trace, of strange dreams haunting those who ventured near, and of an inexplicable feeling of being watched. A cold dread, even in daylight. The last page, written in a trembling hand, like a final confession, contained only one line: "It knows my name. It knows all names. I cannot leave. Cannot. Clara, a lover of history and mysteries, was drawn in, compelled. She didn't believe in ghosts. Yet the sheer terror, the absolute despair in Hawthorne's words, sent shivers down her spine. She spent many nights poring over the journal, every word etching itself into her mind, redrawing Hawthorne's crude map, determined to explore Blackthorn Hollow as a way to unlock this historical enigma. An enigma she was unknowingly destined to become a part of. Clara shared her plan with Mrs. Martha, the proprietor of her boarding house, an elderly woman with a gaunt face and deep-set eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of sorrow. Hearing Blackthorn Hollow, Mrs. Martha paled, her hands clenching the edge of her apron, knuckles white. "Don't go, young child," she whispered, her voice hoarse, like rustling dry leaves. "The Hollow is no place for the living. Those who step in, they don't come back the same. They become part of it." Martha recounted disappearances in the woods over decade-sturdy loggers, curious children, and even a pastor, likely Hawthorne himself, all vanished like smoke. She spoke of moonless nights when whispers drifted from the woods. Not wind, but voices, calling the names of Harrow's residents, like predators summoning their prey. Clara, though politely listening, dismissed the warnings as quaint superstitions of lonely folk. Yet Martha's absolute terror made her notice the town's oddities, furtive glances from neighbors, conversations abruptly ceasing when she entered the local diner, and whispers of Blackthorn's curse echoing from shadowed corners. Immobile Meludu. Clara's curiosity was further fueled when she met Jonah, a young carpenter working near the library. Jonah, with his messy blonde hair and friendly smile, was one of the few who spoke freely with her, an oasis in a sea of reserve. When Clara mentioned Blackthorn Hollow, Jonah's smile extinguished, like a candle snuffed by a cold draft. He recounted how his grandfather, a brave hunter, once ventured into the Blackthorn woods and returned with vacant, lifeless eyes, muttering incessantly about voices that knew names. His grandfather died soon after, en inexplicable demise, and Jonah's family never ventured near the woods again, as if a curse had been passed down. Despite this, Jonah didn't stop Clara, a chilling acceptance of fate. If you must go, go, he said, his voice grave, full of warning. But take something to protect yourself. Not a knife or a gun, but your will. What's in the hollow? It likes to play with minds. It wants you to forget who you are. Jonah's words made Clara falter, a coldness tracing her spine. But her curiosity remained stronger than her fear, stronger than instinct. Clara meticulously prepared for the journey, a preparation for an encounter with destiny. She bought a powerful flashlight, a sharp folding knife, a sturdy rope, and a notebook to meticulously record everything she saw, everything she felt. She copied Hawthorne's map precisely, double-checking landmarks like the Twin Pines and the three-sided rock mentioned in the journal. She also carried the journal itself, treating it like a protective talisman, a tangible link to those who went before, though she wouldn't admit it even to herself. The day before her departure, Clara visited the library again for more information. An irresistible pull. She found an old newspaper article from 1920, detailing a logging crew's disappearance near Blackthorn Peak, without a trace. The article didn't directly mention Blackthorn Hollow, but described the area as a place where earth and sky do not agree, a rift in reality itself. Intrigue, Clara dug deeper, unearthing scattered notes of other disappearances, a young girl in 1890, a schoolteacher in 1945, and a family in 1962, all eerily connected to the woods. She made notes, but her resolve to go remained unshaken, as if an invisible force was pulling her on a late October evening, with the moon hanging like a silver coin in the menacing sky. Clara stepped into the Blackthorn woods. The air was bitingly cold, carrying the sharp scent of pine, resin and damp, decaying earth. Her footsteps on fallen leaves echoed solitarily in the strange stillness, like a distant tolling bell. There were no bird calls, no rustling wind, just a heavy, unsettling silence, as if the forest held its breath, waiting. She followed the narrow path, relying on the map for direction. Deeper she went. The air grew thicker, pressing down on her shoulders like an unseen shroud. Her flashlight cast weak, futile beams, as if the darkness itself was swallowing the light, draining its vitality. The towering pines seemed to lean in, their branches interwoven like a twisted canopy, blocking the moon, creating a natural trap. Clara began to feel an invisible pressure, a cold gaze, as if she were being watched, pinned by something unseen. She clutched the knife in her pocket, telling herself that it was just imagination. But the unease grew, threatening to consume her. After an hour of walking, Clara noticed something peculiar. Hawthorne's map seemed to be inaccurate. Landmarks like the Twin Pines didn't appear where they should have, and the path seemed to loop more than she anticipated, as if deliberately leading her astray. She stopped, checking the map under her flashlight, but the lines seemed to blur, as if the ink was dissolving into nothingness. Bewildered, she tried to steady herself, assuming she'd misread the direction in the dim light. Then she heard a soft sound, like a twig snapping, from behind her, an unmistakable sound. She spun around, sweeping the flashlight through the trees. but saw nothing but dense, endless darkness. The sound repeated, closer, and this time accompanied by a whisper, too faint to discern, but chilling enough to raise goosebumps. Clara called out, "Is anyone there?" But only an eerie silence answered. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she continued forward, determined not to let fear control her, not to retreat. After nearly 2 hours, Clara finally reached Blackthorn Hollow. It was a shallow basin, about 30 meters in diameter, ringed by ancient pines whose branches twisted like gnarled, demonic arms reaching from the earth. The ground was barren. No grass, no fallen leaves, packed hard like stone, like an unhealing wound. As Clara stepped in, she felt a faint tremor beneath her feet, a low, steady hum, like the heartbeat of a colossal, sleeping creature, deep underground. The air here was heavy, thick, as if filled with something invisible, a crushing presence. She stood in the center of the hollow, breathing deeply to calm herself, but her lungs felt filled with dread. She took out the journal, flipped to the last page, and read aloud Hawthorne's trembling words. "It knows my name. It knows all names. I cannot leave." Her voice echoed, but it was muffled, distorted, as if the hollow itself was swallowing the sound, absorbing the very life. As the last word escaped her lips, the tremor beneath the ground intensified, shifting into a sound like distant chanting. Indistinct words, of no clear origin. Clara's flashlight flickered erratically, blinking wildly, and the shadows around her began to writhe, swirling like wisps of black smoke with no source. No end. A wave of cold washed over her, as if someone stood directly behind her, an icy breath on her neck. But when she turned, there was nothing but the vast, suffocating darkness. "Anyone there?" she called, her voice trembling, lost in the night. No reply, but the air grew suffocating, like an invisible, freezing hand clamping onto her chest, squeezing every breath. She tried to step back, but her feet felt rooted, as if the very ground was pulling her down, dragging her into the abyss. The flashlight died completely, leaving her in absolute darkness. A darkness that could not be dispelled. Then she heard it, her name, whispered by dozens of voices. Discordant, inhuman, not of this world. Clara, Clara, Clara. The whispers didn't echo in her ears, but directly in her mind, like a cold blade cutting through consciousness, piercing her very soul. She felt a presence sanctioned, vast, and ravenous, an entity ceaselessly searching. It had no form, yet she knew it was watching, digging into the deepest corners of her psyche, dragging forth fears she had never admitted, wounds she tried to bury. She remembered painful memories, a shattered relationship, crushing loneliness, and past mistakes, gnawing regrets. The entity in the hollow knew all, and it whispered these secrets, its voice both mocking and inviting, threatening and alluring. Clara screamed, trying to cover her ears, but the sound reverberated in her head, inescapable. In that moment of absolute panic, she saw fleeting images, unfamiliar, faded faces, like ghosts trapped in space. In time, a man in clerical attire, Hawthorne, gazed at her with vacant, soulless eyes, his stare piercing. A young girl, dress torn, mumbled something inaudible, but her despair was palpable. They stood amidst the darkness, unmoving, but their gaze made Clara feel violated. Exposed, she realized they were the ones who had come to Blackthorn Hollow before her, and now they were part of it. Eternal prisoners. The entity whispered, its voice now clearer, like a grim decree. Stay, belong to us, forever. Clara shook her head, tears streaming, desperately recalling Jonah's words about willpower, about the final defense. She screamed, "No," and with a desperate surge of strength, tore herself free from the unseen grip of the earth, of the curse. She stumbled back towards the path, the journal falling from her hand, but she dared not stop, dared not look back. The whispers pursued, now a cacophony of shrieks, her name distorted into grotesque, unrecognizable sounds. Branches clawed at her face, blood oozing from scratches, but she dared not look back, dared not slow down for even a second. The forest seemed alive, tree shadows bent, blocking her way, as if Blackthorn itself didn't want her to escape, wanted to keep her. She tripped, scraping her knees, but forced herself up, instinct propelling her. In that moment, she saw a figure standing among the pines, haze-like mist. Yet its presence was undeniable. It had no face, but she felt its gaze, cold and hostile, a gaze full of malice. She turned away, kept running, her heart pounding as if to burst. Each beat a prayer. The whispers now intermingled with other names: Ezekiel, Mary, Tomasas. If the entity was summoning all its victims, pulling them from the void. She didn't know how long she ran, only that when she collapsed at the forest's edge, dawn was breaking. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, but brought no sense of safety, only a cruel illusion. Clara lay there, gasping, her whole body trembling, a shattered wreck. A farmer passing by saw her on the road, called for the townsfolk. They took her back, but no one asked questions. Familiar faces misses. Martha, the diner owner, the old library janitor, looked at her with sympathy mixed with fear, as if they knew exactly what she had endured. Knew she was now marked by the curse. Mrs. Martha merely whispered, "You survived? That is rare. But not everyone escapes completely." Clara didn't reply, only wanting to leave Harrow immediately, to escape this living hell. She was taken to the local hospital, where doctors concluded she was exhausted and in shock. She said nothing of Blackthorn Hollow, knowing no one would believe her. No one could understand. Upon returning to the boarding house, she packed her belongings, resolved to leave Harrow the very next day, to flee this cursed town. Before leaving, she returned to the library one last time to drop off the key. She gasped when she saw the journal, back on the desk, in the empty room. But when she opened it, the pages were blank, pristine, white, as if Hawthorne's story had never existed. A chill ran through her, and she flung the book into the trash, rushing out without looking back, leaving no trace. Clara returned to Boston, but she was never the same. Never the woman she was before Harrow. She avoided darkness, never slept without lights on, and often woke in the middle of the night, hearing whispers, calling her name, cold and persistent. She sought psychologists, but none could explain her nightmares, dreams of Blackthorn Hollow, of the faceless figures, and of the relentless feeling of being watched. She tried to rebuild her life, but loved ones noticed the change. The crack in her soul, Clara became withdrawn, fearing quiet places, and always carrying a small flashlight, even in daylight. A feeble talisman. She never told anyone about Blackthorn Hollow, fearing that speaking of it would allow the entity to find her, fearing she would be dragged back. In Harrow, life continued as if Clara had never existed. The townsfolk didn't mention her, as if her name had been erased from their collective memory. Blackthorn Hollow remained, silent and immutable, a never-healing wound on the land. But the old-timers knew the truth. They had seen others, like Clara, before the curious, the disbelievers, and those forever changed by the hollow, marked by its terror. Some whispered that Blackthorn Hollow was not just a place, but a gateway Something far more ancient than the forest, older than the town, a gaping maw. They said the entity never truly left, only waited, calling the names of those who dared venture in, keeping a part of them forever. In eternal gloom, Jonah, the carpenter, sometimes gazed towards the Blackthorn woods, wondering if Clara had truly escaped. He recalled his grandfather's story and how he'd said Blackthorn Hollow never fully let go, only allowed a temporary reprieve. One night, while fixing Mrs. Martha's roof, Jonah heard a whisper from the distant woods. Calling his name, he quickly shut the window, heart pounding, praying it was just the wind. But deep down, he knew the truth. He knew it was a call. On moonless nights, the residents of Harrow heard whispers from the deep woods names of the living and the dead, echoing like a curse that would never end. They bolted their doors, drew their curtains, and prayed the call wouldn't reach them. But they knew Blackthorn Hollow never forgot. And one day, it would call their names, pulling them into the darkness. Thousands of miles away, in Boston, Clara woke in the dead of night, drenched in sweat. The whispers returned, soft yet clear. Clear. Clara. Clara. She turned on the light, trembling, but the shadows outside her window seemed to writhe, like a dark curtain beckoning. And for the first, she wondered if she had truly escaped Blackthorn Hollow, or if she was merely delaying the inevitable.